Well, both say categorically that it is high time India became a permanent UN Security Council member. Now, India has been pushing for reform of the world body for years on end. India believes that no reform of the UN is complete without the composition of the Security Council changing to reflect contemporary realities of the 21st century. Now, this requires expansion in the membership of the Security Council in both the permanent and non-permanent categories. Akshay Dongre reports.
UN General Assembly President Dennis Francis described India as a reliable and highly regarded partner. Francis, who's on a 5-day visit to India, said the UN appreciated India for contributing the largest number of peacekeeping forces to UN operations.
Reform of the Council is absolutely necessary. If you are in a privileged position, you are not necessarily in a hurry to lose privilege. Reform is inescapable. The question then becomes, what is the formula by which this reform would take place? India has been a long-standing partner of the United Nations. India, in fact, contributes one of the largest numbers of peacekeepers to the system. And that is emblematic of India's commitment to multilateralism and to the values and principles that are enshrined in multilateralism.
He held talks with India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar on Wednesday. On 1st June 2023, the UN General Assembly elected Dennis Francis of Trinidad and Tobago as the president of its 78th session, which runs from September 2023 until September 2024. Francis lauded India as one of the UN's oldest partners. He said that the UN expects India to take the lead in bridging differences amid challenging times.
India is already a key player both globally and at the United Nations. As the world's largest democracy where unity in diversity has endured for many years, India can relate very easily to principles of universality. UN membership is more divided. As President of the General Assembly, I look to India to lead the charge in our quest to repair the trust deficit among member states.
India has been pushing for UN reform in general and Security Council in particular. India, Germany, Brazil and Japan, which make up the Group of Four or G4, are seeking a permanent UN Security Council seat. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has called for reformed multilateralism, one that would make world bodies such as the UN reflect today's realities. Prime Minister Modi has said, I quote, "A mid-20th century approach cannot serve the world in the 21st century. So our international institutions need to recognize changing realities, expand their decision-making forums, relook at their priorities and ensure representation of voices that matter," unquote. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar told the 78th UNGA session in September 2023 that the Summit of the Future to be hosted by the UN in 2024 needs to act quickly. Minister Jaishankar said, I quote, "This should serve as a serious opportunity to drive change, champion fairness and reform multilateralism, including the expansion of the Security Council memberships. We must address global challenges imbued with the conviction that we are one Earth and one family with one future," unquote. The UN Security Council was formed in the aftermath of the Second World War. It was established in January 1946 to maintain international peace and security. After the Second World War ended, the US and the Soviet Union emerged as the main victors against Germany, Italy and Japan. Along with them, the UK also shaped the post-war political order. The then US President Franklin Roosevelt vouched for the inclusion of the Republic of China. The UK wanted France in the grouping. This is how the UN Security Council got its permanent 5 or P5 countries. To become a permanent UNSC member, a country will need the backing of 2/3 of the members of the UN General Assembly and all the P5 nations. While the first requirement is relatively easy to achieve, the second is tough. This is so because all 5 permanent members hold veto power. Thus, if one country decides against a proposal, it will not be passed even if the other 4 reach a consensus. However, before all this, the original UN Charter signed in 1945 needs to be amended to pave the way for the expansion of permanent UNSC seats. There are permanent and non-permanent members of the UN Security Council. A total of 15 members are there in the Council, out of which 5 are permanent and 10 are not permanent. The 10 non-permanent members are elected for 2-year terms by the UN General Assembly. 5 non-permanent UNSC members are replaced every year. India has been a non-permanent UNSC member on 8 occasions. Tesla founder Elon Musk weighed in on the issue by posting a message on his X account that India's absence from the UN Security Council is absurd. Musk said, I quote, "At some point there needs to be a revision of the UN bodies. Problem is that those with excess power don't want to give it up. India not having a permanent seat on the Security Council despite being the most populous country on earth is absurd," unquote. As Minister Jaishankar told the UN General Debate last year, the days when a few nations set the agenda and expected others to fall in line are over.
With the recent outbreaks of conflicts around the world that threaten to destabilize the world peace, the clamor for reforms in the United Nations Security Council is once again growing. Be it India, world's most populous country, or the entire continents of South America and Africa having no representation in this decision-making body of the United Nations, reforms have become a need of time for a more stable and prosperous world. With camera person Tangaraj, Akshay Dongre, DD India.
The President of the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, Dennis Francis, delivered the 47th Sapru House lecture in New Delhi. He spoke about the significance of multilateral institutions and advocated for UN reform to align itself with the contemporary global paradigm.
Urgent need for reform of the multilateral system. Let us face the facts. It is no longer 1945. Our institutions cannot remain stuck in the past and at the same time hope to fix the challenges of today using a toolkit of yesterday. The call to reform the Security Council was again raised by a resounding number of world leaders at the opening of the General Assembly's 78th session.
India's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York, Ruchira Kamboj, highlighted the necessity of UN reforms matching the global changes and aspirations.
The UN's focus this year on the Summit of the Future, an initiative to reimagine and revitalize the United Nations, a UN 2.0, if you will, is a testament to our shared commitment to adapt and evolve. This pivotal moment in history does indeed call for a renewed United Nations, one that responds effectively to the ever-changing landscape of global needs and aspirations. We simply cannot afford to fail.